What does it really mean to grow? Because no one prepares you for this part. They tell you growth is strength, confidence, becoming more. But they don't tell you how heavy it feels when you realize you can't go back to who you used to be. Growing is not an upgrade you download overnight. It's a slow awareness that creeps in quietly, until one day you look around and nothing feels the same anymore. You notice it in small moments first. In conversations that suddenly feel empty. In places that once made you feel safe but now make you restless. In relationships where you keep shrinking yourself just to keep the peace. And you don't know when it happened, but something inside you changed. Growth doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't care if you're ready. It simply shows you the truth, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. At first, you try to resist it. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You tell yourself this discomfort will pass if you just stay quiet, stay patient, stay grateful. But deep down, you know. You know you're outgrowing something. And that realization hurts more than staying the same ever did. Because staying the same is familiar. It may be uncomfortable, but at least you know what to expect. Growing, on the other hand, is uncertain. It asks you to let go of identities you built just to survive. It asks you to question who you became for other people. And it asks you to choose yourself without knowing what you'll lose in the process. You start asking questions you never asked before. Why am I exhausted all the time? Why do I feel lonely even when I'm not alone? Why do I feel guilty for wanting more? Why does choosing myself feel like betrayal? And that's when you realize something important. Growth doesn't always feel like expansion. Sometimes it feels like grief. You grieve versions of yourself that tried their best. You grieve relationships that made sense once but no longer fit. You grieve the comfort of being understood without explaining. You grieve the simplicity of not knowing better. Growing means accepting that some chapters end without closure. That some people won't understand why you changed. That some doors close not because you failed, but because you evolved. And that's one of the hardest parts. Learning that you can love people and still outgrow them. That you can be grateful for what was and still walk away. That growth doesn't mean you're better than others, it means you're more honest with yourself. At some point, you realize how much of your life was built around being needed. Being useful. Being agreeable. Being the one who adapts. And you confuse that with love. But growth shows you something uncomfortable. Being needed is not the same as being valued. Being available is not the same as being appreciated. And being strong for everyone else doesn't mean you're strong inside. You start to notice how often you abandoned yourself just to keep others comfortable. How often you stayed silent to avoid conflict. How often you said yes when your body was begging you to say no. And slowly, painfully, you learn that growth requires boundaries. Not walls. Boundaries. Boundaries that protect your energy. Boundaries that honor your limits. Boundaries that remind you that your needs matter too. And when you start setting them, everything changes. People react. Some respect you more. Some pull away. Some try to make you feel guilty for no longer being who you used to be. That's when growth really tests you. Because it would be easier to go back. Easier to apologize for changing. Easier to shrink again. But you don't. Because something inside you finally understands this truth. Staying small to keep others comfortable is not kindness. It's self-betrayal. Growth also teaches you patience. Not the kind where you wait endlessly. But the kind where you trust your own timing. You stop rushing your healing. You stop forcing clarity. You stop demanding certainty from yourself. You realize that becoming who you're meant to be is not a straight line. It's cycles. Steps forward, steps back. Moments of confidence followed by doubt. And instead of judging yourself for that, you learn to sit with it. To listen. To allow growth to be imperfect. You forgive yourself for not knowing sooner. For choosing safety over truth. For staying where you had already outgrown. Because you understand now. You weren't weak. You were surviving. And survival teaches lessons that growth later refines. As you grow, your priorities shift. You no longer chase validation the same way. You stop explaining your worth. You stop forcing connections that feel one-sided. Peace becomes more important than proving a point. Rest becomes more valuable than being productive. Alignment matters more than approval. And that's when growth becomes quiet. No announcements. No dramatic moments. Just subtle changes. You respond instead of reacting. You pause instead of panicking. You walk away instead of arguing. You choose rest instead of burnout. And one day, you realize something beautiful. Life didn't get easier. You got stronger. Not harder. Not colder. Just clearer. You learned to sit with discomfort without running. To be alone without feeling empty. To stand firm without needing to be loud. Growth teaches you that becoming yourself is not about adding more. It's about shedding what no longer fits. The masks. The expectations. The roles you played just to belong. And yes, it hurts. Because every layer you remove reveals vulnerability. But it also brings relief. Relief from pretending. Relief from over-explaining. Relief from living a life that doesn't feel like yours. So if you're in that phase right now, where everything feels uncertain, where you feel disconnected but also aware, where you're questioning everything you once accepted, you're not lost. You're growing. And growth is uncomfortable because it demands honesty. With yourself. About what you want. About what you deserve. About what you're no longer willing to tolerate. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to rush the process. You just need to keep choosing yourself, one honest decision at a time. Because growth isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you were before you learned to shrink. And that is worth everything.